for low-income women and minorities. And thank you, Senator Runner, for joining me today, along with our staffs. Let's begin by just saying that California will be receiving an estimated $85 billion from ARA, an unprecedented federal response to what we think is one of the deepest economic crises since the Great Depression. And the Recovery Act investments aim to provide some immediate relief from the pain now hitting families, communities, and states. And equally important, the Act creates an historic opportunity to bring transformational jobs, training, assets, and services to low-income people and communities and to stimulate the advancement of the green economy. California state agencies, localities, and community partners are moving ahead now to channel stimulus funds into a wave of new jobs and job training, support schools, healthcare, and other human services, and maximize available tax assistance to low-wage workers. Today's challenge is to examine ways to maximize opportunities for all Californians, including such traditionally underrepresented workers as low-income women, particularly those on CalWorks and those neighborhoods with high concentration of families living in poverty. Each of the panelists today will discuss what is currently being done for workforce development, especially with respect to low-income women and communities. We'll begin with an overview and then invite our panelists forward to discuss key areas of workforce development. Senator Runner, would you like to have?
Sure, just a quick couple comments. Sure. Obviously, that as these dollars come to us in the state of California, I think for many of my fellow colleagues, what we're interested in is not only how we will use these dollars in regards to the training aspects, but even more importantly, and that I would like to be hearing about, and that is job creation. I mean, I think training is very important. I think that's what we need to be doing. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that people actually have a job for what it is that they're being trained for. And again, as California now faces one of the highest unemployment rates in the nation, it's going to be incumbent for us to understand that this is a two-step process. We haven't succeeded once we've trained somebody. We've succeeded once they become employed. And so that's what we're really interested in, making sure that there's a connection use of those dollars in that way in order for families, particularly in these targeted groups, to be successful.
Thank you very much. Now let's provide, the first panel is going to provide kind of an overview of the workforce development. So I'd like to invite Mr. Ruben Lizardo and Ms. Charlie Metzger and Ms. Barbara Halsey. Is it Halsey? Halsey. To come forward. Please come join me up here. And first I'd like to ask or invite Mr. Lizardo, the Associate Director of PolicyLink, to give us an overview and national perspective of what is currently being done with ARA funds.
All right. I want to thank Senator Lieu, Senator Runner.
I
want to thank Senator Lieu, Senator Runner, Andy, and the staff and the agency heads, and especially the community folks who are here with us today to give their insights and experience that will help to strengthen implementation of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act here in California. And want to just jump right into it. I was asked to talk about three things. One, what are the equity provisions in the ARA Act as it was written and is sort of coming to the states? What are the actual policy provisions or charges that are being given to states to do just what Senator Lieu said, sort of reach out to those folks who have the highest barriers, were hit earliest and hit hardest by the economic recession? To also talk a little bit about how California is doing in comparison to what we're learning in other states, and to share any advice about the go forward. And so those are the three themes that I'm going to be focused on. So you know a little bit about PolicyLink, we're a national organization based in Oakland with offices in New York, Los Angeles, and spent a lot of time in New Orleans with the recovery. And we've been doing work around the national recovery now for about a year. We have focused ourselves on really looking at transparent and equitable recovery, and I think I've provided notes of the PowerPoint outside for folks who came in. I don't know if Andy has provided notes for the two senators and the staff, but we're working in at least 10 states, and they're listed in the PowerPoint. In California, we're a proud member of the California Green Stimulus Coalition that you may have heard from in different ways as you made decisions about authorizing the additional dollars that were in the ARA throughout the spring and into the summer. Those are the states that we've been working in. As was said earlier, I think it's worth at least noting that both at the national level and at the level of California, that while everybody was hit hard by the economic recession, some people were hit harder. And so when you look at either ethnicity or issues of gender, people are not doing. Everybody's hurting, but some people are hurting more than others. And as was said earlier, there's $175 billion, about $85 billion to California. The categories, in talking about jobs, to a certain extent, the stabilization dollars that have come to education or some of the other public sector agencies, in essence, stem the flow of further job loss for people. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that the money helped to keep jobs from being cut, and many jobs were cut, I think you know, in terms of schools. But from a PolicyLink standpoint, the real jobs creation vehicle, to answer Senator Runner's position, is really the huge investment in infrastructure development that was either in transportation or energy efficiency, water, et cetera. And that's not an unusual thing. California, as you all know, in 2006, approved $43 billion worth of general obligation bonds to do the same thing. So actually, the state of California has invested more in job creation from an infrastructure standpoint than the money that's coming to California through the Recovery Act. Those are just things to keep in mind. And so high-speed rail, of course, is an important job creator, and that's going to create new jobs. So is transportation, I think, is the biggest chunk of infrastructure dollars that are in the stimulus package. And if you look at the PowerPoint, it gives you a sense of what California is getting, and if you're in a locality, what, you know, if you're larger than 200,000 or less than 200,000 or 5,000, what kind of money you're expecting to get. So this is money flowing for so-called shovel-ready projects. We know that energy and energy efficiency is another big chunk of change that could also result in creating new jobs, which was the imperative that I heard Senator Runner talking about. I want to just share with you a little bit about the provisions that are in the ARA that already do help either the state or the departments or agencies if they want to target, which is what we have suggested, that if you really want to help those people that are in greatest need and are facing the greatest barriers, well, you can't have a one-size-fits-all program, whether it's a training program or a job creation program. You literally have to be intentional about targeting and bringing those people in and addressing the barriers they have. So the Act itself calls for that. You know, it talks about preserving and creating jobs, assisting those impacted by the recession. Again, I said earlier, it talks about doing it through investments in infrastructure. But I want to point out the advice, the guidance that was sent out by the Office of Management and Budget in around April. And it specifically, and these are the measures that I think if you're looking from a policy or an institutional practice standpoint, the things you do to protect or expand equity are these things here. They talked about promoting local hiring. What does that mean? That means setting aside a certain percentage of the jobs that are being created with the infrastructure dollars for those people who have faced barriers, be they people with that are high school dropouts, be they women who are underrepresented in the building trades, or African Americans nationally are also underrepresented in the building and construction trades, be they folks that are coming out of the prison system, men and women who are coming out. I think you're supposed to be releasing 44,000 folks out of the prison system. Well, how do we ensure that they're ready to go to claim these jobs? For one, is setting aside the jobs and ensuring that the agencies that are putting the money on the street at the local level work with the developers and the unions to assure a certain amount of money. And that's called, oftentimes that's basically called either a local hire or a targeted hire provision that's built into what's called a project labor agreement. And there's a number of examples across California that have been working quite well to do that in Los Angeles and Oakland and other places that we can refer you to later on. But it also talks about ensuring compliance with equal opportunity laws. And one of the things that we have found as we worked in California and other states is that some people are making assumptions that folks don't have equal rights to certain resources that are public. And one of the most important ones that sort of there's civil rights protections for people who come out of incarceration, and sometimes people take the point about having been formerly incarcerated in certain jobs that maybe do require different kinds of security clearances, but not all jobs. And so there's a kind of blanket application of saying if you were formerly incarcerated, then you're not eligible, when that is actually a violation of civil and other kinds of equal opportunity laws. Also, we know that California's application of TANF to exclude folks who have previous drug convictions basically puts a lot of people out of them being able to get the services, be they the services that they need themselves or the training. So there's a lot of things that the ARA also intentionally put, the folks, Office of Management and Budget, put into the ARA to basically ask folks to apply this recovery dollars in the widest possible way to help the people who have been most left behind. A couple other things to note, that there's specific set-asides for encouraging disadvantaged businesses to be able to be part of the building programs that are being funded. 25% of the neighborhood stabilization dollars that are being put through municipalities are supposed to go to individuals and families that are 50% of the median area income. The one pot that's really targeted totally at low-income people is a weatherization assistance program, which is being administered through your own community services development department, and it will reduce energy costs for low-income families, 50,000 homes, but would also provide a training avenue for folks to be into this industry that promises to be actually one of the growth sectors in terms of green building retrofits. And this is just looking at one part of the residential market. And then, as you are all knowing, and I'm sure we'll hear, that some of the competitive grants, the distinction being made is that a lot of the money flowed to the states by formula, and so the President and the Congress could not change those programs and get that package out of the Congress. If you try to change the program, then it would be a new program. And so they flowed the money through existing programs, and then they added additional guidelines, as like the ones I just read. But the competitive grants, you'll see that it signals the Obama administration's intention to really target resources to those folks that we're talking about in this hearing today. So the DOL Pathways Out of Poverty training grants that focus on either allied health or green jobs are specifically saying who are the folks that are facing the barriers, folks coming out of prison, folks that are dropouts, women, etc., and they're in fact incentivizing training that brings those folks into economic opportunity. So this is kind of the signal that the Obama administration is sending, that in the next 3 years, and if there's another Obama administration, if you think about 8 years, this is the realignment that might be happening in terms of workforce training and job creation. A couple other things I want to just mention in terms of provisions, because I want to be clear about that this is not something that that just social justice or equity folks are saying. This is basically the design of the act. Right now, the National Surface Transportation Policy, otherwise known as Safety Law, is being debated about reauthorizing it in Congress at the time. It's the last time it passed, it was $400 billion to the states. California's part of it is larger than what we would have got, what we're getting through the ARRA. Right now, when it was passed the last time, there was a sense of Congress resolution that encourages state DOTs and MPOs to set aside 0.5% of project fund dollars for highway projects for workforce training and apprenticeship programs. So we're talking about not having enough money for our workforce training programs. If we just applied that to all the highway projects here in California, that would be a boom to the workforce training system that we have here. In other words, the state DOT and the MPOs would be encouraged to go along with the mandate that's in the existing law. It also encourages that state DOTs and MPOs support the idea of setting aside 30% of the work hours of these largely federal funded construction projects for those same populations. Same thing goes in HUD. When you build with HUD monies, you're supposed to encourage or actually guarantee that 30% of the new hires in your projects are coming from low-income people of color. So it's not a new thing. We're not doing something so radical here at the state, and the topic today is not something way out there from the 60s. It's just common business. And when you think about demographic change in the tax base of the state of California, that is increasingly majority of color, it also makes business sense to be targeting and bringing folks into the mainstream, because we're going to be dependent on these folks doing the work and paying the taxes in the state. So now what about this question about how we're doing? How we're doing, and I think all of our friends that are going to come up here and talk from the agencies and departments know this better than I do, because PolicyLink is an outside organization trying to encourage and support change, but they're the ones having to take up trying to implement the ARA. And basically it is a moving train with deadlines and that have to be met in terms of proposals put on the table that are calling for additional leveraging of resources against other programs that may or may not be that easy to leverage against the funding program that's being talked about. Encouragement of partnerships. We ourselves are encouraging partnerships and scaling up and building on what could be strengthened. So it's a very challenging proposition to do what I just said we should aspire to do. And having said that, I think that California is doing about as good as any other state. But I'll be very frank with you. I think where the targeting of work or training or an economic opportunity to women or people of color or folks that are coming out of prison or dropouts is happening, it's happening because there was already a will and a capacity at the local level and some level of track record of community groups or community colleges or the WIBs or community organizations that are working with prisoners coming out of the system that were already trying to work together. So they're well positioned to take advantage of this new opportunity. But it's not because it's an easy task. It's actually very challenging to merge the pots. And even if there was no ARA and we're trying to get this kind of partnership building, it's the same kind of thing. So what are we saying? At PolicyLink, here's what we've been telling people, that if you really want to get more out of the ARA in the long term, you really do have to commit to targeting people, specific groups of people who are facing barriers. And so if you want to find out from the agency heads and department heads how we're doing, that's one of the questions. How are we targeting, how do we make sure the folks that are most vulnerable, that are affected most by the economic downturn, are participating in the programs that we're going to hear about today? The other thing to do is we know that low-income people and people who are vulnerable live in similar communities. So we need to find a way to target neighborhoods and communities that are most left out. There's something to said about neighborhoods and cities, but also some of you may know there's a couple bills going that I think are in suspense right now that are around the challenges that disadvantaged, low-income, unincorporated communities are facing in terms of getting access to infrastructure dollars. And as I said earlier, the ARA uses investment in infrastructure to create jobs. So if low-income, disadvantaged communities are basically getting the short end of the stick on the infrastructure dollars, they don't have a job creation engine. And so not only are they not getting access to the basic supports that we all take for granted, like clean water, access to sewer, paved roads, sometimes street lighting, but they also don't have an engine for job creation in their communities. So there's a need to focus on places. The other thing is, if you can't mandate the targeting, you could incentivize the targeting. So give the projects, give the agencies, give the community groups and the municipalities that are doing this kind of work more points in the RFPs or the selection criteria, or even more additional resources to do what takes a lot more work, and insist on, I guess the last point, insist on something of an inclusive and planning decision-making process that ensures voices closest to the hardship are heard. I want to point out that I think you may hear about the clean energy training program that the California Energy Commission is putting on the street. It was a great thing that you get more points if you actually start having a community hearing to get people's ideas on the front end about this kind of thing. And you'll find that people who do have these challenges will say what they need, and that way their voices will be heard and hopefully be part of the planning. I want to just say a couple other things and then stop talking here. But it's also important to know that people were affected differently by the downturn. So we know that the building trades are telling us that 30 to 40% of their membership is on the bench because construction really caved in terms of the housing market and also the ability of the state to issue bonds to do the $43 billion of infrastructure that we've been talking about are a driver of growth creation. But also women and African Americans. If we say that infrastructure is the way in to good jobs, we have to do something about the fact that these groups are underrepresented. The other thing is, Senator Lou knows this from all her leadership in education. In 2000, the census was telling us there's about 1 million 18 to 24-year-olds without a high school diploma. I think it's been adjusted to around 600 to 700,000. Trying to compete in the most competitive labor market on the planet. So if you want to see young Californians take advantage of the ARA opportunity, there has to be an intentional process to either create the programs or do outreach to them. And then we're particularly concerned about the 44,000 men and women that are going to be released from our prison system, that we really absolutely need to find a way to connect to economic opportunity and make sure that they're not discriminated against as they come out into our communities. We really do need to find a way to get with that challenge. We know that it's like healthcare. It's causing us really bad budget challenges here at the state. So just a couple things about innovations that to sort of crystallize the point. Some of you may have heard of the Kansas City Green Impact Zone, and that's an attempt to use ARA dollars in Kansas City to basically leverage a number of ARA investments and also just existing investments in Kansas City and Missouri, the state of Missouri, have in neighborhoods that are high poverty. And so it's something to watch. What they've been doing is channeling the housing and neighborhood revitalization dollars, a lot of the transportation dollars that could be put into the projects, connecting them to either the rail or the bus or rapid transit. They are providing, leveraging their workforce training into these communities. They're intentionally saying these are neighborhoods that need to be connected in a more coherent way to what our opportunity is. And so that's something that's an innovation that's happening in the United States. It's getting a lot of press. But you'll be glad to know that similar attempts are being made to do the same thing here in California. I've just lifted 3. The city of Oakland, without knowing that Kansas City had a green impact zone, had already talked about doing this, and they have some money from the governor. I think it's some kind of model cities partnership that the governor funded that LA and Oakland have, and they're targeting 4 neighborhoods in West Oakland and East Oakland with their energy efficiency dollars and some of their neighborhood stabilization dollars. In Los Angeles, a partnership called the 9/11 Partnership that is connected to LA Trade Tech and led by Denise Fairchild is combining the Youth Build, AmeriCorps, who do have ARRA funding, and some of the dollars that the Weatherization Assistance Program folks have to do both job training and also weatherize. They're starting with 100 homes, but they want to do a whole section of South LA. And in San Diego, this is something the Community Services Department could take some credit in. The MAC project, which is getting a good chunk of the $185 million for weatherization of low-income family homes, is in a partnership with the local trade union, the San Diego City College, and themselves to basically do the weatherization of homes but provide a training pathway in for 50 youth and adults. And so that's the same kind of thing that's happening here in California as well. The other thing that I think is important for you as elected officials to think about is how to see the ARA as an opportunity to take advantage of the loosening up of federal guidelines. So, for example, the age limitations were changed a bit for summer youth employment program. President Obama asked to extend unemployment benefits for a longer term and also said, let's find a way to make sure that people who are getting unemployment insurance can get a longer term education path. So that would allow them to be in a community college or some kind of state certified apprentice program that takes longer and doesn't require a workforce piece, so they can actually get a credential or a certificate that's going to put them in a career ladder that's going to mean some success for them. And so I want to just point out a few of the models that already exist here in California that you should be thinking about how they could benefit from the ARA or how they could be strengthened in terms of any kind of long-term reform of the workforce system here. So some of you may know about the Career Advancement Academies that the Career Ladders Project that's in the Board of Governors here has, and they are working with 23 colleges. They do create pipelines and partnerships of employers and workforce boards. I know that the folks in the WIBs know very well about this, and the Vice Chancellor of Workforce and economic development of the community colleges. They do broad outreach. They include basic skills. They provide wraparound services. They are including resources for supportive services, able to get them transportation money, and they're connected to a job at the end of all of that. Another thing that's interesting is USDA has money through the food stamps program to actually provide for training for folks that are in who are getting food stamps, and it allows them to do the same kind of thing that we're talking about here. And I just put some emails if you want to get in touch with folks. I want to end on just one note that what's happening around workforce development right now should be informing our state's advocacy on the reauthorization of WIA and looking for ways to make WIA more flexible so that participants can use it to get further up the education ladder. We know that the tipping point to get on a career ladder, middle skill career ladder in any industry is about 1 year of post-secondary education with a certificate that gets you into a good paying job. And so we need to be able to have folks not have to be going to work first, but really investing the time in the education and having the resources to do that. So I won't belabor what's on the bullets because you have the notes, but I would say that we can use the RR opportunity to experiment and expand and strengthen the things that we know are working and think about how that will affect us in terms of either pushing for reforms at the federal level or also in terms of our own state system. And with that, I really want to thank folks for the time given to PolicyLink for this.
Thank you very much. I just, so you made your comments, and you think California is still pretty competitive in terms of getting this work done compared with other states?
I do, because I think California has a number of assets to build on. One, it has a very strong nonprofit system that's working with many of the populations that we're talking about. Two, in terms of the green building retrofit arena, there needs to be a climate policy that dictates that you have to do energy efficiency or reduce greenhouse gases. A lot of the other states don't. If you think about the way the federal government invested its money, it was transportation and energy efficiency and green. It signals the Obama administration's intent to use climate change and the need to strengthen public infrastructure as a driver of economic recovery. And we're a state that's proven to invest in that, $43 billion. Actually, right. The other thing to say is people of color voted in higher percentages for the bonds that we passed in 2006. So the demographic change is happening. People care about infrastructure. So I think we are better off, but I'm not saying there are not challenges. There are myriad challenges.
Many challenges.
Yes.
Do you see much coordination, who's doing what, or does there need to be a model out there that people can follow, or people just seem to be creating their own partnerships?
Yeah, I think it is a wild, wild west, but I'll say this. The point I want to underscore is that the agencies, the departments, whether they're state level or municipal governments or county level governments, need to be doing the best they can to identify the community side or the business side partners or the educational institutions that could be their partners that are already committed to this. Now, I would say it's not a one-size-fits-all. So if there are folks who do that and you can incentivize and support the innovation that's needed and you have a 2-year window, there's a chance to basically make a case for the structural reforms that are needed to sustain this kind of work. So I would say that it is a tough piece of work, but I think you have good intents on the part of the state agencies, and there's a wealth of partners at the community level that can be your partners. But I know it's not that easy to come together in a partnership and move something very quickly. I think it just means making a commitment to that. But I know that there are folks, like in Oakland,
right.
People want to. They're clamoring at the door, and it's tough to do an inclusive planning process and in the short time frame. But I think you get more buy-in and more sustainability and actually more political support for what we're doing as well.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to move back over here. Thank you, Mr. Farah.
Welcome. Thank you. Of course, by all means.
You deserve a glass of water or something.
Thank you.
I'm
good.
We'd like to invite Charlie Metzger, who's the Deputy Director of the Department of Social Services. Welcome. And Barbara Halsey, for the Executive Director of the Workforce Investment Board, to let us know how your agencies are utilizing funds for job training and increasing opportunities for women and minorities. So with that, Charlie, why don't you go ahead and start?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and member.
Mr. Runner will be back.
As you mentioned, my name is Charlie Metzger, and I'm the Deputy Director over the Welfare to Work Division in the California Department of Social Services. And there is a significant amount of money that's been made available through the ARRA stimulus bill for the TANF program. And in California, that's the CalWorks program. So I was asked to just give you kind of just a quick overview of what the money was available for, how that would weigh in on the ability to create jobs for women and minorities, and to kind of give you a sense of the process that we've undertaken to provide these kinds of dollars and services and get them out at the local level here in California. So just a little background information for everyone. The TANF Emergency Contingency Fund set aside $5 billion for the nation to do a number of things for states for federal fiscal year 09 and 10. And so that money is available for that 2-year period to provide 80% federal reimbursement for increased spending in 3 categories. And those 3 categories are increased basic assistance expenditures, increased expenditures for non-recurring short-term benefits, and increased expenditures for subsidized employment. And I'll spend most of my time talking about subsidized employment because I think that's primarily what this particular hearing is targeted towards. Of that $5 billion, it was built to allow individual states to access that money up to 25% of their TANF block grant over the 2-year period. So in California, that is $1.8 billion that will be available for us in those 3 categories for the 2-year period. For the 2-year period. However, that money is available on a first-come, first-served basis, and so states are encouraged to apply and access the money as readily as possible. And let me just say, California was the first one to have their application in for ECF money.
Is this competitive, or is this?
It's not competitive, but you have to expend money over a base period.
Okay.
So our base period could be 2007 or 2008, and we can pick whatever base gives us the best advantage in all 3 categories.
And what does?
And so in some instances it's 2007, in some instances 2008. So we're taking the base period that gives us the best bang for our buck. So for basic assistance expenditures, as you know, there's been a rising caseload in the CalWorks program, and so we have easily met our base expenditure requirement in that area, and we are estimating that in just this year alone, that we'll get around $375 million due to increased expenditures for basic assistance costs in CalWorks. Over the life of the 2-year period, we expect to garner $1 billion for that particular effort.
There's been that kind of increase.
There's been that kind of increase in our caseload in CalWorks over the last couple of years. But more importantly, to sort of focus on the major topic area for this hearing, we are also able to bring in increased expenditures on subsidized employment that over what we have spent in the base year periods. And let me just say that subsidized employment has not been an activity that California and the counties in administering the CalWorks program, it's not been an area that counties have utilized to a great degree. So any expenditure in excess of our modest base will make us eligible for 80% of the federal reimbursements. So we have been working very closely with counties to sort of create a strategy for designing and developing increased slots for CalWorks families. And as you'll know, CalWorks is primarily, the families that we serve in CalWorks are primarily low-income women, and a large percentage of those low-income women are minority women. So a large percentage of the subsidized employment slots that will be developed will be available to that group of individuals. So we are estimating for just federal fiscal year 09 that will bring in about $40 million for new subsidized employment slots, and that over the 2010 year, that will rise to at least $275 million over the 2-year period. So in order to get to that place, in order to be able to establish how much we might be able to create in terms of additional slots for CalWorks families, we needed to pull together our county partners and talk about what it is they could do to plan and get ready for and develop relationships with appropriate employers and agencies in their community that would be willing to actually provide a slot to actually have an individual be subsidized in an employment situation. And so we've worked closely with the county since last March because we knew this money was available, and we had them do some preliminary planning work with their community, with their local workforce investment boards, with their other county agencies, with their community colleges, with their adult ed programs, with the local employers in their community that might be able to utilize the opportunity to get 80% of an employee's wage subsidized and create some jobs for our families. And the counties were able to come back with estimates of slots that they think they can create in their localities, and provided an estimate of those kinds of things in terms of costs. And so we were able to submit an application to the federal government for the first $40 million that will be available for 2009. And that application went to the federal government on June 30th. However, once the application was received by the federal government, there were questions about what we were doing with our work study program in our community college system, because that is part of California's CalWorks work study program, and we had not included it in our base dollars. We felt that the community college program was separate and apart from the subsidized employment program that was going to be created by the counties. So we felt like it wasn't an apples-to-apples comparison. So they returned our application and said, you need to put the community college work study program in your base and resubmit the application.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
One of those. And again, this is I'm trying to figure out. See, I think things are very different in regards to how we deal with these issues today versus how we might have 5 or 6, 7 years ago. Low unemployment. You know, now in some of these communities that I'm sure are reflective of some of the highest involvement that you all have. You know, some of those communities are running 20, 25, 30% unemployment. So my question is simply this, and that is, are we concerned that in one sense, where employers are having to lay off folks on one side, that they're backfilling those individuals then with subsidized employees?
Let me just say,
you know, in terms of a concern that way.
it's certainly a concern, and it is a prohibition in the CalWorks program to displace any employee, any existing employee. So that cannot happen. So employers will have to expand.
You mean it doesn't happen at least job for job? But if you got a job over here that has one kind of title and position, and that's not related to the job that you've just hired, you know, I mean, it seems to me you avoid that by making sure you have a different job description, some of those other issues. I'm not sure how quick. Well, I guess let me ask you that: how closely can you audit that when it is maybe a different job description?
Let me just say that the unions in most communities are very, very on top of this particular issue.
Most of these jobs aren't union jobs, are they?
Well, when you're going to develop jobs in county agencies, community colleges, in private and or public employers, you're going to have a lot of union opportunities involved. And generally speaking, most counties work
So most
with,
of your jobs that you're creating are public jobs?
no, they're public and private.
Okay, so let's talk about the private side where there aren't unions then.
Well, I don't know that there aren't unions in private employers also.
I would submit that most of the small employers in a community, you know, the dry cleaners, the liquor store, those folks aren't union. And that is the largest employment base out there.
And I certainly can't speak for every employer that a county is doing business with.
Okay.
What I can tell you is that they have all very, very closely monitored the non-displacement provisions. They work with their county council. That when they develop these slots with whatever employer is involved, they make sure.
Well, let me ask you this then: what percentage of these jobs go to public employment versus go to private employment?
At this point, since we haven't had a program of this magnitude available to us in previous times, I couldn't tell you what the split is.
Okay.
At this point, counties are just now ramping up. I would say a large percentage of these positions are going to be in public entities or city entities or some form of government entity. I don't know how many private employers are going to be involved. I know there will be some. I just don't know how many, how large they are.
Are these just for 2 years also?
And they're only for 2 years, and generally counties will do subsidized slots anywhere from 3 to 6 to 12 months. So
basically, I guess what you're saying is that a lot of these jobs that are being created are going to be in the government public side as opposed to the private side.
I would
your
say
observation.
I would say that I would think that a large percentage of them will be in cities, counties,
So
schools.
in terms of things like manufacturing,
Well-
those kind of issues, then are those? That's not what government does.
Well, I'm not suggesting that counties won't have relationships with private employers because they work through the Workforce Investment Board entities, and those relationships already exist. And these non-displacement provisions apply in those circumstances too.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So at any rate, we are correcting that application. We expect to get a positive response from the federal government shortly. We have already issued the implementing all county letters and the county fiscal claiming letters, so counties will be ready to hit the ground when the money is available. We are working with Department of Finance to obtain the budget authority, which will require some review by the legislature to provide us with the funding authority, because that will now have to go into our budget. And we'll be moving forward with this. Counties have been doing a lot to plan and develop and be ready to launch as soon as the money becomes available. We have worked with counties to make sure they understand what the requirements are. We've done regional training workshops so that they understand what the rules and implications are for the funding. We have provided lots of technical assistance to the counties in order for them to be gearing up. And we will be assisting them as this process proceeds. They have been very heavily involved in their communities with outreaching to other county departments, other county agencies, other city entities, United Ways, Chambers of Commerce, the local Workforce Investment Board, to try to create new subsidized employment slots. Los Angeles County alone is looking to, over the lifetime of this money, to create at least 10,000 new subsidized employment slots. San Francisco is looking at over 1,000 placements in the near future. Stanislaus County is looking to get involved in subsidized employment in a big way for a smaller county. They're looking at about 400 slots. We have 35 total counties who have expressed an interest in getting involved in creating subsidized slots. We expect to see unprecedented numbers of these slots available for our low-income families and provide opportunities, because subsidized employment slots are opportunities for employers to test out employees. And if employees do a good job and that training opportunity produces someone who's very productive, more often than not, employers will keep them on after the subsidy is gone. So that is something that we're very interested in. And we will be tracking the number of positions that are created in unsubsidized subsidized employment, and then how many transition into actual real jobs when the money is no longer available. And we are still working on our non-recurring assistance portion of the ECF money, because that's another nut we need to crack with the counties. But we thought the subsidized employment issue was the most prominent and most important for us to move forward on. And we're expecting to see a lot of work to begin making sure that the money continues to flow throughout 2010, because we have to work with the federal government on a quarterly basis. And we have to advance and estimate and re-advance and re-estimate the need each quarter after the funds come in. So we're very excited. It's a very exciting opportunity to use these dollars, and I think it's an opportunity for many of our low-income families and households to get an opportunity that they might not. And some of the families that we are seeing in our doors these days, this is a great opportunity, because that can get them back out into the work world where they came from to begin with. So,
is there any emphasis, because Mr. Lozado pointed out where these stimulus monies were going to be directed, toward infrastructure projects, green jobs, that kind of stuff. So when you're partnering with the counties, et cetera, is there an emphasis to reach out to those entities to create those kinds of opportunities for people?
the lion's share of the discussion occurs locally with the county and with their local workforce investment board to identify jobs in demand and areas where employers need employees. And so if that's in the green industry, if that is in the health industry, if that is in public service, it depends on where jobs are in demand in that locality, which could be some of those.
It could be some of them, but
some
not
of those
necessarily.
occupations. But there is no emphasis per se.
Okay. Senator Renner.
Again, you went through and named a few counties, and at least I know in at least a couple of the counties that you mentioned are all laying off people in terms of their workforce. So again, I'm trying to figure out what kind of jobs then individuals are coming in for on the subsidized side.
It would have to be in areas where they aren't laying off.
Okay.
So they'll work with their county councils and their unions to make sure that they're not displacing any employee.
Okay. Again, most of them are clerical that they're laying off, other kind of service clerk personnel and things like that. And I'm trying to think about what kind of jobs these individuals would be actually applying for.
Well,
it would seem to be like a similar workforce. Entry level workforce.
I can't answer for the counties. I don't know the answer.
I'm not asking
to
for
the
the counties. You're the placement.
But what I know is that counties that have laid off social workers or eligibility workers or those kinds of staff will certainly not be putting these people.
Well, these
in
people
those
wouldn't be
kinds of
social
jobs.
workers anyhow, would they?
Well,
Most
not likely.
Yeah, right. Basically, we'd be talking about, I would think in these placement training opportunities and whatnot, these would be entry-level clerks, folks that would be, job placements in that category.
Possibly. Some of the families that are coming to see us are newly unemployed individuals who are highly skilled.
Right.
So it just depends on who we have coming in the door and has a need for some additional assistance and have some skills that we could put them in a subsidized job.
Does it concern you that we're doing this kind of job growth and investment into what seems to be a many public jobs with a limited time, looking forward to kind of an economic challenge into the future, which does not seem to have a lot of job growth into the future? At the same time, many of these counties are actually laying off their current workforce. I'm just wondering if we are actually long-term helping them in their placement in regards to trying to create a job that they will be able to have for a long time, or again, what my bias is we need to be figuring out how to create private sector jobs in order to get people employed,
I think that is
not just
certainly
train people, but actually
critical.
create the jobs out there with this, with what we use this money for.
Mr. Lozado.
I guess I'm glad you made your point, because I was trying to find out if it's an intentionally a temporary jobs program to help get somebody off of unemployment, so that it stimulates the economy in some ways. They're working, they're going to buy things, etc. And the long haul challenge is what you just said. What's the downside of putting people to work now but doing what Senator Lou said? making sure that those people who went through that program are connected to the job creating engine in that county. If it's infrastructure, if it's allied health, the idea is to make sure they don't stay there, because it is a temporary stopgap measure, and I wanted to know what the downside of that was.
I would hope that some of these things that are being created are, for all intents and purposes, long-term jobs for people to get permanently, in the long run. But, we'll watch what's going on here at DSS. And with time here, I would like to move on and ask Ms. Halsey to jump in and talk to us about Workforce Investment Board.
Chairwoman members. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Whoops, turned it off. I hope that I can provide you a bit of background on the amount of money that's come to California under workforce training programs and the Workforce Investment Act, as well as some of the funding that's come under the Unemployment Insurance Fund. How we've looked at utilizing that money, given the strategies that we had already laid out with the California Workforce Investment Board and our local workforce investment boards, and hopefully demonstrate to you how we're approaching partnerships. And I was pleased with Mr. Lizardo's description of some of the key elements of utilization of funding and some of the things that we've actually implemented at the state level and are implementing through our local workforce investment boards that address the special populations that we're talking about here. So the Recovery Act spends approximately $51.8 billion in workforce development activities. And California is estimated to receive $5.47 billion of that. $4.5 billion is targeted for unemployment insurance related programs. So certainly the extension, the increased benefit amounts, longer term unemployment benefits being paid to individuals uses up the majority of that $4.5 billion. $535 million of that is dedicated for workforce development programs, and $0.5 for miscellaneous programs that benefit California but don't necessarily come through the state. So in terms of our formula funding, Mr. Lizardo indicated that the majority of the funds that came under the Recovery Act to the workforce investment entities, to the California Labor Agency, Employment Development Department, and our local boards, follows the requirements of typical WIA money, which means 85% of that money, or some $387 million, went out to local areas via formula. So adult formula funding was in the amount of $68 million. WI youth funds, with the implementation of a summer youth program for the first time in nearly 10 years, had a call on $157 million of that funding. WIA dislocated worker programs were allocated at $133 million. $27 million of the dislocated worker funding was set aside for rapid response activities at the local level, so layoff aversion and layoff response activities to those employers that are downsizing or shifting their workforce, for a total of $387.5 million going out in that formula funding.
Is that for 09?
That's specifically the ARA, the Recovery Act.
Okay.
Funding.
For this current year?
Yes.
Okay.
We have until June of 2011 to fully utilize those funds.
Okay.
15% discretionary funding is the governor's set-aside funding. So under the adult program, $12 million of that sits at the governor's discretion. Youth money, $28 million. $33.3 million in dislocated worker funding, for a total of $73.3 million in governor's discretionary funding under the Recovery Act. Other funding includes $27.7 million in additional assistance money, specifically under the dislocated worker category. Again, we use this money for areas, for example, the NUMMI closure created a situation in Alameda County that they have to respond to that was certainly not anticipated. So there's a set-aside of funding to deal with just those kinds of circumstances where we have large dislocations that were unanticipated, so that we can resource those local areas to deal with the workers that are going to be affected.
Aside from unemployment, is it retraining? What's that
Correct.
translated
Retraining, providing individuals with information on how to connect with
Counseling.
unemployment benefits, kids' grief counseling is one of the things we're seeing areas having to provide more and more frequently. A lot of intervention services and mental health services. Certainly a good deal of support in restructuring how you're doing finances. We know that many of those families are now hit with the possibility of losing homes, so providing them with some financial counseling becomes a part of the strategy that we use when we're going out and doing rapid response activities with that population. So that gives you an idea of the kind and the levels of funding that are coming into the state. Additionally, we're in the process of rolling out the governor's discretionary money. We did partner with the Energy Commission on the Clean Energy training grants, and I'll talk about those in just a bit. The Green Jobs Corps received funding in the amount of $10 million. Those grants have been awarded, and those programs are in operation now. That was done in partnership with the California Volunteer Association. So we were very conscious about connecting to community-based organizations and making sure that we were reaching out to those underserved populations through that Green Jobs Corps award. The Governor's Allied Health Initiative will be funded out of the discretionary funding as well. And we're in the process of applying for Department of Labor competitive grants. $220 million is available in healthcare sector grant opportunities. $500 million is available in green jobs. And that competition, some of those competitions are currently underway. The State Workforce Investment Board will be applying for a state energy sector partnership grant. Our intent is to apply for $6 million, which was the largest amount that we were eligible to apply for under that grant. That SGA, Solicitation for Grant Application. The State Labor Market Information Division has already applied for funding under a labor market information grant that was available in that competition. Those proposals are currently being evaluated at Department of Labor. Nonprofits, along with WIBS, were eligible to apply for grants under the $500 million Green Jobs competition. That competition is underway. And labor organizations also, we understand that our labor partners have applied for a grant to the Department of Labor, specifically focusing on transit jobs. And then there was a fifth opportunity that provided existing grantees who were receiving money from the Department of Labor to come forward and ask for expansion of funding to support programs that they already had underway. So that gives you broad brushstrokes of the Recovery Act funding that's come in through the state. Let me talk just a bit about strategy. In 2007, Senator DeCheney sponsored SB 293. SB 293, or the Workforce Training Act in California, placed the responsibility for developing a statewide workforce strategy under the auspices of the California Workforce Investment Board. We took that opportunity very seriously, and we looked at what was going on throughout the nation as good practice around workforce development efforts nationwide. What we saw was an opportunity with sector strategies which engage employers in understanding what's going on within the job market and within regional economies, which speak to providing low-income individuals access to career and education pathways that are meaningful and will result in employment, which speak to organizing the right kinds of partnerships around sectors that are meaningful to local and regional economies. We saw that as a way to begin organizing our work and aligning systems at the state, regional, and local level that could better prepare California for managing what was going on in the economy in 2007 and certainly with what's going on in the economy in 2008, 2009. So with the charge under the Workforce Training Act, we adopted sector strategies as the framework for how we would approach workforce development. And not too long after we adopted sector strategies, we had the opportunity to be called upon again under AB 3018, or the Green Collar Jobs Act. The Green Collar Jobs Act put into law that the state board would use sector strategies as the framework for aligning how we address economic need and job training programs throughout the state. And it also called for us to establish a cross-disciplinary Green Collar Jobs Council that brought together the California Energy Commission, Business Transportation and Housing, the California Public Utilities Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency and Air Resources Board, a number of foundations and private individuals who sit on the California Workforce Investment Board, Community College Chancellor's Office, the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, a number of our critical state agencies, to begin looking at how we collectively understand and address the needs of California's businesses in terms of skilled workforce far into the future. The Clean Energy Workforce Training Program that was co-funded by governor's discretionary funding and the California Energy Commission, I believe, is a fine example of what Mr. Lizardo discussed in his presentation. It really does target those specific populations who often sit outside of economic opportunity. It requires that those areas coming in and proposing projects demonstrate that they have demand in their local economies that will result in jobs upon the completion of training. The one thing I want to be very clear about is the workforce development funds that we received under WIA are not job creation monies. They're job training monies. Mm-hmm. We have to work with our partners in the Energy Commission, in Business Transportation and Housing, in the CPUC, to understand where that job creation stands first to emerge, so that we can align the training programs that we're putting people into now to the pipeline of skilled workers those businesses are going to need as they start to recover from the current economic downturn.
And that's happening, correct?
That is happening, yes.
Okay.
We believe that announcements on the Clean Energy Training Program will be made as early as tomorrow. We're thrilled that we had over 52 applicants come in and apply with projects under that program, and I'm sure that our friends from the Energy Commission will talk more about that strategy when they come up, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. Okay. The California Workforce Investment Board is also concerned about how our system specifically is serving disadvantaged communities. At the June 17th meeting of the State Board, our members called for a work group to begin looking at how monies under the Recovery Act were being moved down to benefit disadvantaged communities. We met with that group on the 17th of September, and we've laid out a work plan to begin going out and serving our community-based organizations. We've done an initial assessment based on data runs done by the Employment Development Department of what percent of the population currently being served fits under those categories that we identify as disadvantaged or high-risk individuals. And we've also worked with the California Workforce Association, who you will be hearing from in a bit, to identify what local workforce investment boards are doing to move the Recovery Act money down to those disadvantaged communities and disadvantaged populations within their local areas.
Is it possible that you would share that?
Absolutely,
with
we
our
can
committee?
send that information over.
Right, that's great.
The State Board, in addition, also understands that it's really imperative that we work through regional partnerships in order to address California's workforce needs. We've long had a partnership with the Economic Strategy Panel. The panel has designed regional profiles of 9 regions throughout the state. They've also worked with a private consultant, Collaborative Economics, who has developed a data source, and we use that data source. We're promoting the use of that data source, industry clusters of opportunity, to assist regional workforce investment boards in coming together in regional collaboratives to better understand the economic trends and the workforce demands that those trends belie. So in October, we'll be releasing a technical assistance grant to our local workforce investment boards, asking them to come in and tell us where they're at in terms of diagnosing the economic needs within their regional economies, understanding what partnerships they need to develop with education, with economic development, with community-based organizations, and with business to really dig deep into what sectors and what industry clusters are growing within those economies, and what that means in terms of workforce supply and training that we should be doing. Talking to them about leveraged investment strategies, the example that we've just demonstrated with the Energy Commission, where A portion of the funding for the Clean Energy Training Grant came from CEC funds, and a portion of it came from WIA 15% money in a leveraged pool to move out a larger initiative, is what we would like to see replicated at the local and regional level throughout the state.
And we're just concerned. We appreciate all of that, but we are concerned that no one gets left behind, so to
Absolutely.
speak. And the population that we're addressing today gets involved with this. And I know the most problematic part of that population are incarcerated folks that we are releasing. So, it's imperative that we all kind of work together to really include social services
Right.
in this discussion and make sure that those populations get what they
Right.
need.
And Charlie, I appreciate her comments that they've been working with their welfare departments to connect with workforce investment boards. Often the workforce investment boards and the one-stop centers throughout the state
Right.
sit under the umbrella of human service organizations at the county level. So there's typically a connection there. I also, I'm glad that you mentioned incarcerated populations. In June of 2007, on behalf of the California Workforce Investment Board, I made a connection with the AB 900 task force. And as a result of that connection, we've articulated a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to support them as prisoners are being released from CDCR into local communities. We've utilized a portion of the 15% money to provide additional resources to our local workforce investment boards. We've articulated an interagency agreement with the local workforce investment boards, Department of Corrections, and the Employment Development Department, laying out strategies for employing individuals or providing economic opportunity to those citizens as they reacclimate into their home communities. So we're very concerned also about
Okay.
re-engaging that population.
Okay. We just need to make sure that that's still occurring since they've had change of leadership. And
Right.
so,
We're currently working with the
Okay.
new leadership.
Okay.
Absolutely.
thank you very much for providing the overview and giving us a lot more information that we can use. And let's go on with our second panel. Thank you very much. Our second, that was the overview panel. This is the first panel. Ways to impact workforce development for women and minorities in the health information technology and allied health fields. And Mr. Lozardo, you've been invited to stay for all of our panels. Yeah, okay. Only two of you, yes. Jose, is it Milan? Mian. Okay, and Senator Susan Rosenthal. From California Edge. Susan, okay. And I'd like first to have our community college person talk to us about leveraging ARA funds for job training and targeting these populations that we've been talking about today.
Oh, thank you, Senator Liu, and thank you for convening this hearing. I was listening to Ruben's presentation with rapt attention. A number of the programs that he highlighted in his presentation are actually funded by my office, and I had a small role in creating some of those opportunities. The community colleges obviously have a strong focus on serving low-income individuals, underserved populations. And one of the things that concerns me with federal ARA monies is that the monies are short-lived. They expire in a few years. And for sustainability purposes, sustainability of effort, you really need ongoing financial support for these programs, and particularly for supporting the students as they progress through these training programs. One example of the disconnect between the ARA monies and the realities of our state budget was that 3 months ago, as little as 3 months ago, when we were told about the cuts to the community college system office, we were told to expect $130 million in ARA backfill monies. That amount was reduced to $37 million in backfill monies as little as a month ago. Last week, we were told the definitive number is now $35 million in backfill monies. So having some semblance of continuity and some amount that you can actually project what kinds of courses you're going to offer, what kind of support services you're going to be able to offer to the students. That's very, very important. And having a firm number really helps to be able to plan effectively to serve the students of the state. So that's one aspect of the ARA problem. The second aspect is more of an internal one related to the state's budget. As you know, Senator, when the state budget was signed, you identified certain areas of categorical programs for flexibility. So that means that local colleges can use these monies interchangeably with other program areas. So those economic and workforce development programs that are funded by my office, those monies can actually be used for some other purpose within the categorical menu. The problem is that, A, the money is reduced, and that we could live with that. We have to live with that. Everybody's in state governments having to live with reduced monies. But the problem is that, and it goes to the issue that Ruben identified as far as training people for jobs, and also the whole job creation aspect that Senator Runner had referenced. The Economic and Workforce Development Program is one of those categorical programs. We train people for jobs in the green economy, in allied health, nursing, and a variety of other high-wage, high-demand areas. To now put those programs to compete with the same amount of money for the categorical programs that are devoted to student support services like EOP&S and disabled student services, etc., really is a Hobbesian choice, to put it mildly, for the community colleges. It's who are they going to shortchange the worst? And I don't think that does a good reflection of California's commitment to quality post-secondary education and training. And it really doesn't do the service to those students who are most at risk, who need the most amount of support in order to succeed. Women, low-income individuals, underserved populations that need remediation, that need basic skills training and education. All of these are supportive aspects of the education and training that we provide that is A, reduced, and B, now has to rob from other programs in order to offer any type of service at all to the students. So I didn't want to start on this negative aspect.
But I do understand that ARA funds, the community colleges are getting some monies to do some of this work. And what you're saying to me in response is that the state, because of the budget situation, has lifted the categoricals and is all being mixed up together, and it's not being done. Is that fair?
They're all mixed up in the categorical pot, and the amount that was we were initially told was the amount for backfill from ARA monies was reduced from $130 million to now $35 million. So yes, it is being used interchangeably, and yes, it is vastly reduced. So anybody who can tell me that you can continue to provide 100% of the services with 50% of the funding or less, tell me the secret how that's done. I'd really like to know.
Okay.
And then on the positive side, I didn't want to be all doom and gloom in my presentation, Senator. On the positive side, we're doing really some very exciting things in the area of allied health and green technology that I wanted to bring to your attention. Specifically, that was your focus. And particular with allied health, what we're doing is we're competing with other agencies of the state, obviously for these competitive grants of ARA money from the Department of Labor relating to allied health. I think Ruben and Barbara had mentioned that in their presentations. Really exciting about this allied health grant proposal that we're putting together, because we are expanding significantly the opportunities for students to engage in online and distance education. That has not been done at the scale that we are anticipating doing it. And that will allow single mothers, it'll allow working families the opportunity to complete that education and training at a time that's convenient for them and their family commitments or employment commitments. That's a significant, I think, change in the way we're approaching this type of training, the didactic or classroom training. And then we're expanding our network of employer partners so that when it comes time to do actual clinical work or the work that they're applying the skills and the training that they obtain in the classroom in an employer setting, that we've expanded the number of employers that are part of our partnership here so that placement for this training opportunity, this on-the-job skills, obtaining on-the-job skills is vastly increased. So that's one aspect. And the second aspect is the creation of virtual health facility. We're getting now into the virtual world where we're actually recreating machinery, tools, people, facilities relating to health education. And Susan, having a former life with Kaiser, will appreciate this. You're able to actually use this machinery. You're actually able to treat the individual, but it's a virtual person. Right. So you can't harm them, and you can't harm this very expensive machinery, but you get a familiarization with it, which is really incredible, and it's the next step in providing this type of highly skilled training and education for individuals.
For health purposes.
For allied health purposes, yes.
Now, how many people, this hearing is dedicated toward women,
right,
and underserved and minorities. So
right.
Is there any kind of particular outreach are you doing to
yes.
this segment of population? Or because most folks have just talked about just generically, that yes, women are included in CalWORKs, of course, and women are included in the unemployment lines, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But is there something specific that anyone is doing out there that is addressing the needs of the underserved as we have defined them here?
Yes, we are actually engaging with a number of community-based organizations to establish those pipelines for these programs. So they are women, they are low-income individuals, they are underserved populations.
You're keeping track of who they are.
Absolutely, we are keeping track, and we're also keeping track of how they progress through the program. It's not a question of just getting the people in.
Correct.
We want to know the deliverable once they exit the program.
Okay, good. Well, we'll give Ms. Susan Rosenthal an opportunity here. You are the interim ED of the California EDGE campaign. That's Education, Diversity, and Growth in the Economy. So I'd like to have you talk to me about what's going on with ARA in your group.
Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Senator Liu. And you've given part of what I was going to introduce myself. Okay. So that's great. And also to let you know, as Jose said, I have long experience in healthcare, first as, a long time as a union representative, then working for Kaiser in government relations and in workforce public policy. And I'm going to speak on three broad issues, let you know a little bit about what the EDGE campaign is, talk a little bit more about what are the allied health occupations, and in that context, why are they such a good target of opportunity for the ARA funds and for helping women, low-income women and disadvantaged minorities lift themselves out of poverty. And finally, to make some comments about the implementation of ARA funds in this area and some recommendations about how to go forward. The EDGE campaign is a nonpartisan, statewide nonprofit coalition of major employers, educators, regional workforce development leaders, labor and industrial associations. And the purpose is to develop sound public policy to prepare Californians for high-wage skilled jobs that will drive our economy. More than 130 organizations have endorsed EDGE, including Policy Link. And we're really an interesting amalgam. And we had a recent meeting where it was commented that our recommendations, one doesn't know necessarily if they come from social justice organizations or business organizations. And that's probably the most unique part of EDGE as an organization, that it has chambers of commerce, the Bay Area Council, Policy Link, Latino Coalition for a Healthy Californian, and we take our representation and charge very seriously. We've come together around 5 founding principles, which are to invest in regional workforce and economic development, provide all Californians access to high-quality post-secondary education and skills training, provide working adults with opportunities to move up the skill ladder, link workforce preparation in institutions to create pathways to high-wage jobs. We're not interested just in any jobs, but high-wage jobs. And align program goals and measures to achieve a shared vision of California's future. EDGE focuses on what we call middle skill jobs, and those are jobs that require more than a high school diploma, but not necessarily a bachelor's degree. In California, there's been so much emphasis on bachelor's degrees that these middle skill jobs have often been forgotten. These middle skill jobs represent 48% of the jobs in California, and our projections say that that will stay steady until at least 2016. And these are jobs in allied health, building trades, emergency services, and what makes them so unique and to fit into this hearing is that they're within reach of people who are currently working in low-skilled, low-wage jobs if they have access to effective education and training and appropriate supports. The goal of EDGE is to have every Californian have access to at least 2 years of post-secondary education or training leading to an industry-recognized degree or credential, which Ruben talked about in terms of that really is the tipping point for people being able to have decent jobs and decent lives. And there's also another very important alternative way of getting there, and that's through apprenticeships. Allied health occupations, I'm moving on to my second area, are often called the hidden jobs. Everybody knows about doctors and nurses, but 60% of the healthcare occupations fall outside of those categories, and there are approximately 200 occupations that require degrees from just a post-secondary credential to a PhD, although the vast majority of them fall into the middle skill job category. And they're jobs such as respiratory therapists, medical imaging technologists, paramedics, LVNs, psych techs, dental hygienists, surgical techs. So it's a really vast array of jobs. Right now, the shortages are not what they were due to our recession and the postponement of a lot of the retirements. But this recession will not always be with us. We all hope. We hope. We expect.
And people will eventually retire.
Right.
Yes. And prior to this recession, and these are pretty astounding figures, that the middle skill portion of these jobs had vacancies ranging from 60% to stenographers to 178% for physical therapy assistants. So these are huge vacancies and huge opportunities for people to get trained with a certificate or a 2-year degree. What is also happening, and this is very interesting in California also because of the diversity of our population, that educating and training people for these occupations is actually, the diverse population is actually a plus, because these are the patients as well. And there's been studies that have been done that show that people feel more comfortable being treated in a setting where there are others around who look like they do. And so the disparities, especially amongst Latinos, is huge. That 17% of the allied health workforce is Latino, and the expectation that in 2020 it will be 41%. So this is a huge disparity that this gives us the opportunity to address. I'll now go on to ARA implementation within the healthcare occupations. And the Allied Health Initiative that Jose referred to was a public-private partnership that really can afford real opportunities to expand the kinds of partnerships that EDGE is promoting, which we call in the workforce world sector initiatives or regional sector partnerships, which are partnerships of employers, training and education providers, labor organizations, community organizations, and the workforce system around specific industries and geographic areas that address the workforce needs of both employers and the needs of workers for relevant training. So it's got a dual customer focus, which is really why it's been really successful. The other reason that it's been successful is that it is data-driven, and that is really crucial. And there was a recent study that hasn't received as much attention as I thought it would, but by an outside organization called Public-Private Ventures, that did a controlled study that suggests that participants in skills training sector initiatives earn more per hour, work more hours, and experienced a decrease in poverty. They also had higher quality jobs, which are indicated by an increase in health insurance and paid sick leave. So this is a very powerful vehicle for organizing workforce training. We do have areas in the state where there are important partnerships that serve the needs of disadvantaged populations. Some of the ones that I'm aware of, and there may well be others, are the Central Coast, San Francisco, and San Diego. EDGE recommends, though, that all state training programs, funded programs, implement regional sector strategies for all future investment in allied health initiatives. The state also should create bridge programs, wraparound programs that can bring more low-skilled adults and youth into training for higher skilled jobs. The lack of basic skills is an enormous challenge in California at every level of higher post-secondary education. And one model that also has research that demonstrates its effectiveness is integrating basic skills with career training, not having them go on separate tracks. And in California, this model is exemplified in 51 career advancement academies in our community colleges. And the largest number of those are for allied health care. The Career Advancement Academies are also becoming integrated into the models in several regions as they apply for federal stimulus grants through the Department of Labor. One of the most effective ways and cost-effective to improve the opportunities for low-skilled workers in California will be to build California's data infrastructure to track success within the community colleges, but it needs to go beyond this, and California has not done this, to also track into the EDD and into the employment system. In conclusion, the EDGE campaign believes that the state of California should set a goal to ensure that every Californian has access to at least 2 years of post-secondary education, leading to an industry-recognized degree or credential, or an alternative path such as apprenticeship. This should be implemented through regional sector partnerships that creatively align funding streams, agencies, and institutions that offer educational pathways and support services which lead to success in education and a career and provides businesses with the skilled workforce that they need. California EDGE campaign recommends that the state of California adopts regional sector strategies as its framework for all workforce training and education. These strategies have been shown to best serve the training and educational needs of economically disadvantaged and low-skilled groups. EDGE stands ready to help the state legislature develop policies to implement these regional sector strategies for all of the state's future workforce investments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any comment after hearing these two presentations?
Well, one thing I did want to underscore is the point about the Hobbesian choice between the categorical programs or workforce training, which is a high-cost venture in terms of, I wish Mr. Runner were still here, to hear about the engine growth part of it. When you're talking about creating workforce training programs into the either energy efficiency or utility or water, that comes at a higher cost than the state reimburses community colleges at the moment for. This is just or allied health. Yeah, exactly. Well, but in terms of that part, the one that I understand, the infrastructure arena. But I was going to say it's actually not a false choice, because the students that are disadvantaged need the categorical program support to succeed in the program. And so I know it's a very challenging budget situation, but I think as we look out into the next 2 to 3 years, the long haul strategy is to really take what's the best of what's working, what can be sort of strengthened through ARA, and think about how to reform our system to do more of that. And I think our friends in community colleges, I think there's a few presidents who even talked about this radical idea that they be I think there is supposed to be a bill, hopefully, that will look at how they'll be judged on student success, but want to have the flexibility to put the money where the inputs where will best result in success for students. So I basically
not only students, but the state of California.
Yeah, the state of California, of course, in the long run. And of course, I concur with that. And I want to just give some top-level numbers. We just did a study on terms of infrastructure, and green is part of the infrastructure arena. And we found that there were 933,000 middle-skilled jobs, the ones that were being talked about, that were encompassed, and about 40,000 new openings across the 5 subsectors of infrastructure. And these are things we're funding, and we need infrastructure. We're going to fund it, and so we are creating our own engine for job opportunities. And I would concur that the community colleges and the apprenticeship programs, and at least for youth, the high school career academies are the 3 pathways into the good jobs in the middle skill arena in terms of infrastructure. So I think what our friends are saying here is really, to be heated and sorted through somehow the leadership you can take even beyond ARA in terms of the education
Right,
finance
right.
here at the state of California.
I appreciate those comments, right, and thank you very much. We'll get our last panel up here, and
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, we have a second panel is increasing job opportunities for low-income women and people of color in green and energy-related jobs. We have Karen Douglas, who's a commissioner, and Panama Bartholomew, senior advisor for the California Energy Commission. Jennifer Mitchell, who's a policy director of Cal Workforce Association, and Karen, is it Fees, director of Sonoma County Workforce Investment Board, and Mr. Lozardo's on the side. Thank you very much for joining us. So let's start off with Ms. Douglas and Ms. Bartholomew. Is that correct? Or Mr.?
Mr. Bartholomew.
Mr., I'm
my-
sorry.
I've been called worse.
No. Oh, my goodness. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Chairwoman Liu. My name is Karen Douglas. I chair the California Energy Commission. And I wanted to make some overview comments about the California Energy Commission's overall work administering Stimulus Act programs, and then ask my advisor, Panama Bartholomew, to speak in more detail about our workforce training work. The Energy Commission is administering a very significant amount of stimulus money. We're directly administering $314 million in ARA funds. We're also applying for and assisting other California applicants for competitive funds in the energy area. And we are providing resources for all Californians to track ARA energy expenditures, whether ours or also links to federal decisions at our website at www.energy.ca.gov/recovery. There are $62 billion in the Stimulus Act for energy at the national level, including both appropriations and available tax credits. The biggest program that we administer, and the most probably directly relevant here, is the state energy program, which has $226 million in it due to the stimulus. We typically get $2 to $3 million a year from Department of Energy for this program, and so obviously it was an enormous augmentation this year. Guided by the Stimulus Act, we developed a number of criteria to use to help us focus in on a manageable number of programs. First criteria for us was effectiveness in stimulating the economy and creating or retaining jobs in California. That's straight out of the intent of the Stimulus Act. Also, to achieve lasting and measurable energy benefits consistent with the loading order, to expend money efficiently with accountability and help meet energy policy goals, and to leverage other funding, because the more money we can draw to California, the better at this point in time. We have moved forward with a number of programs out of the state energy program. We have worked with Department of Finance and General Services to establish a $25 million revolving loan fund to fund energy efficiency improvements in state buildings, and then that fund is replenished over time with energy savings, so it will be there over the long haul to help the state improve its own building stock. The Clean Energy Workforce Training Program, which we contributed $20 million to from the State Energy Program, $15 million to from AB 118, which was passed by the legislature in 2007 to help fund investments that will transform our fuel and vehicle sector. A fairly significant contribution from the PEER program, which funds cutting-edge energy research, and funds from the workforce agencies and private match. It added up to an $87 million program. We have put, at this time, $25 million into a low-interest loan program for public buildings, almost exclusively local governments. So It's an existing program that we've augmented. We're letting loans out at this point at 1% interest, which is obviously a very low rate, and we're getting tremendous interest in that. We've got a clean energy generation program. It's in the range of $35 million to help incentivize the installation of clean energy systems, also to help attract manufacturing as a component that we're looking very hard at. And just today, we approved a program for building retrofits in California that will be up to $95 million. Building retrofits are extremely important from an energy savings perspective. It's really the low-hanging fruit of the energy efficiency world, and it's just been so hard to get at it. And what we really needed to begin to get at it effectively was money, and here came the Stimulus Act. So we're very excited about it. It's also true that by most calculations, energy efficiency retrofits are one of the very, very most effective ways to create jobs, because you get relatively a lot of work done per dollar spent.
So you're not talking, are you talking only about public buildings, or are you talking about private?
We're talking about public and private. The program will be competitive. We're actually releasing the competitive solicitation early next week, and we have categories for, here, I'll turn the page where I've got it written down, but we've got categories for residential units, commercial buildings, and we are giving extra points for applicants who can come in and show that they are serving at least a 25% disadvantaged population. We're giving additional preference to applicants who show that they are partnering with grantees under our Clean Energy Workforce Training Program. So we're really looking for ways to get great programs going, public and private, throughout the state. I'll touch on this briefly. We're administering $49.6 million through the block grant program. We made a decision to essentially pass that money through to small cities and counties. There are over 300 small cities and counties. We did not do a pure per capita distribution, although the distribution is based on per capita. There's a minimum grant of $25,000 to any city, no matter how small, minimum grant of $50,000 to any county. And for cities or counties that have a particularly high unemployment rate, we provided a modest tweak to the formula to give them a bit more money. So the local jurisdictions have tremendous discretion over how they spend block grant money. For the most part,
To be used for energy efficiency.
well, yes, it has to be used for energy efficiency.
Okay.
For the most part, they're looking at public buildings. Some are looking at private buildings. Some are looking at regional collaboratives to do municipal financing.
Okay.
Municipal financing is the other element of the $95 million solicitation. There's a lot more that we're doing under stimulus that I could talk about, but I wanted to let Panama get into details on workforce and then see what questions you have. I'll just make the broader statement that we're doing very, very many things at the Energy Commission to help the state with the transformation to an energy economy that meets our climate goals and meets our generation needs and preserves the reliability and the system needs that we all have. And so there's just a tremendous amount of work happening at the Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, the Air Board, the Cal ISO, and this is really the case where we saw a real need for workforce investments that are targeted to help us meet these policy goals. And these are policy goals in many cases have very significant amounts of public investment over time associated with them. So I'm very excited about this opportunity, and please, Panama.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Liu and valued staff. As the chairman just mentioned, we have some very ambitious goals around energy and climate change here in California, and we're also receiving significant venture capital investment into California. We received over 60% of the national investment in clean tech venture capital last year, about $3.3 billion coming into California. It's incredibly important because in the clean tech industry, for about every $100 million you invest through venture capital, it's about 2,700 jobs. And even in a down economy this year, we already have received over $1 billion of investment in clean tech venture capital in the state. If we're going to achieve the goals, all these policies, if we're able to continue to bring this investment into California, we're going to need a well-trained and educated workforce to be able to show that we can capitalize on those programs and really put that money into good use. And so the goals of the Clean Energy Workforce Training Program, or I'll just call it the program at this point, are to provide the workforce and the programs to be able to allow us to capitalize on those goals and on those funds. The Clean Energy Workforce Training Program has two very immediate goals. In the first year alone, train over 20,000 individuals in green building, clean energy generation, and transportation professions, alternative transportation professions. And the second is to create the framework of programs that will allow us to educate thousands of new students in these professions from the high school level all the way through to adult learning. The chairman said we're investing about $87 million into this program. It's an unprecedented amount. It's the largest clean energy workforce training program in the country, but it is a drop in the bucket compared to the need for us to meet our goals and for us to be able to take a real dent into our unemployment rate. So we recognize that this is just a beginning of this kind of training programs in the state of California. So our goal is to start to create some of the frameworks and some of the partnerships that we think are necessary for us to be able to continue to build upon this to be able to help us meet our goals. When the Energy Commission started to look at investing in workforce development, we are very new to this community, and we recognize both for expediency of getting ARA money out the door very quickly, as well as not wanting to create yet one more agency working in workforce development, that it made a lot more sense to work through the agencies who already have the institutional infrastructure and the relationships on the ground and in place for us to be able to work and partner with them to be able to get the money out the door. Lucky for us, they've also put some of their money on the table as well, combined into the $87 million. So our $87 million program combines Federal Recovery Act Fund, state AB 118 Clean Transportation Funds, our research and development funds at the Energy Commission, our peer program, and public-private partnership funds, match funds from the applicants to the program. I'm just going to briefly cover the 5 components of that program, and I'll start with the crown jewel of that program, and that's the solicitation that Ms. Halsey just mentioned in her presentation, the SFP for $58 million in competitive funding. You have 2 handouts before you. One of the handouts describes the entire $87 million program. The other handout describes this SFP in detail. In the solicitation for proposals, we are funding partnerships between workforce investment boards, community colleges, and regional groups to create programs around green building, clean energy generation, and alternative transportation training. What we're looking at is a program focused on displaced workers, underemployed workers, and new workforce entrants. And in particular, we're focusing heavily on the dislocated workers and the new workforce entrants and offering additional preference to those applicants that came in that are going to be serving communities that face historic barriers to employment. So particularly dislocated homemakers, folks that have been hit particularly hard by this economy. We really want to focus these funds on those individuals and those communities, and so we've given additional preference to applicants that are coming in going to serve those communities with these programs. We also want to make sure that these programs are actually providing the real-world education that's needed out there in these industries. And so we've required each of the applicants to come in and have these programs be overseen by employers' councils called Green Employers Councils. So if you're going to be providing training in energy efficiency retrofits, you need to have energy efficiency retrofit contractors be part of your council that's overseeing your work. If you're going to be working in clean transportation, you need to have a car company or a fuel company overseeing your work and your program that you're developing. As Ruben said earlier, one of the keys of our program as well is focusing on community forums. We wanted to make sure that as the workforce investment boards and community colleges were putting together these programs, that the communities that they operate in and they would be serving, make sure the community and the community groups knew about these programs. So we gave additional preference to those applicants that came in, and it provided a community forum before applying to let folks know about the kind of program they were putting together. These were incredibly successful. I was in San Diego yesterday at their solar conference, and they were talking about the community forum they had. They garnered 70 different employers out of that community forum, and a significant amount of community groups that they had no idea were interested in this program before, and it made it a very attractive proposal coming in. We're expecting to fund nearly 30 of these regional partnerships, and as Ms. Halsey mentioned, we'll be announcing the winners tomorrow. Of that $58 million, that was an investment of $15 million of Recovery Act funds into that. All of the rest of it was leveraged state funds from our AB 118 Clean Transportation, PEER, and then private sector match, along with the Workforce Investment Act funds. We've also are spending $5 million of our Recovery Act funds and $3.8 million of our Clean Transportation funds, and giving it out through the Employment Training Panel to focus on underemployed incumbent workers, those folks who have still found a way to keep a job in this economy but are underemployed at this point. And so we will be putting out contracts for funds in those three areas: green building, clean transportation, and clean energy generation. The other three programs I'll just briefly mention. We are working quite closely with the Chancellor's Office over at the community colleges to fund a whole new generation of curriculum and teacher training around clean energy transportation with our AB 118 funds. If we're to truly meet some of our goals of clean transportation through vehicles and fuels, we're going to need a workforce and a training program in place to be able to deliver that. And so we're investing a significant amount of funds into developing those curriculums at the 10 centers of excellence in the Advanced Transportation Technology and Energy Initiative at the community colleges. Senator Hancock had a bill, Assembly Bill 519, that passed last year that provides $12 million of peer funding to support the development and operation of over 61 green technology career partnership academies. An incredibly successful program here in California has been going on since the early 80s that provides an opportunity for high school students to take the last 3 years of high school in career academy focused training programs based around a certain industry. We are funding 61 of these career partnerships across California, and we have a wide, for the next 3 years, a wide range from really across the state have come in for these programs. And the last area I'll mention is we're not only funding direct training and education, but also we recognize the need to really start to find out more about the clean energy economy. And what are the needs of the employers? What are the training programs that we don't have yet that we're going to need at our community colleges, high schools, and universities? And then how can we start to build some of the capacity regionally for us to be able to accomplish this? And so we've used some of our clean transportation funds, our AB 118 funds, to start to work with the Chancellor's Office over the community colleges as well as the Workforce Investment Board to start to look at opportunities to do statewide surveys of what employer and employee needs are in this economy, work with the Centers of Excellence of the Chancellor's Office to do regional needs assessments about the kind of programs we need in the community colleges, and then use some of this funding with the Workforce Investment Board to build some of the regional partnerships and some of the capacity at the local level to really put in place sector strategies to go after clean transportation and make us a leader in clean transportation manufacturing in the state. So those are the 5 components of the Clean Energy Workforce Training Program. I saw in your questions you wanted us to briefly talk about the competitive workforce funds that we're going after from the federal government. I'll just mention those by name. As was mentioned by Ms. Halsey, we are assisting with the State Energy Sector Partnership from the Department of Labor. We're also partnering with Employment Development Department in their labor market information development around the green economy, particularly on climate change. And then we are partnering with the Chancellor's Office, the community colleges, to go after the Solar Workforce Program grant. We're going to create, if we get that money, create a statewide standardized education program and train-the-trainer program for solar installation. And lastly, just came out last week, a smart grid workforce solicitation. We're looking at working with a number of CSUs to bring some of that money to California and put in place the workforce we need to develop our smart grid. So those are the just some of the programs we're starting to look at in our first year of working in workforce development over at the Energy Commission, and we look forward. It's been a great opportunity to work with some of our sister agencies we've never worked with before, and we think it's just the start of a fantastic partnership, not only at the state level, but all the way down to the local level as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the comment because I think it's high time that we stop working in our silos and working, across purposes that we all can do a better job together if we do it together. Let's go on with Miss Jennifer Mitchell, and we'll wind up with Miss Fees.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and friends. Thanks to the eloquence and the expertise of Barbara Halsey, I can ditch most of my opening remarks, so I'm grateful for that, and you will be too. I'm with the California Workforce Association. We represent the state's 49 workforce investment boards and hundreds of career centers. And just so you know, the relationship is that the California Workforce Investment Board sets the policy. The Employment Development Department gets the money out. They administer the funds. We represent the locals with the state, the legislature, the federal government. So our members received the Workforce Investment Act funding from the ARA funding. And the first money out the door. Let me just say one thing about structure really quickly. I know that you have a lot of questions about how CalWorks recipients are being served, TANF folks. The way that our boards are housed, they're 51% private sector led. They have private sector chairs. They're housed in some cases social service agencies, sometimes local economic development, mayor's offices, so the structures are different, but in all cases a chief local elected official is held responsible, so that's kind of how that works. So the funding that has gone out, the ARA funding, the youth funding was really the first money out the door, and as Barbara Halsey mentioned, a lot of these folks have gone a long time really without having funding and without running youth programs, or if they did, they did it because they got other funding or cobbled funding together. Right. So this summer, we're estimating, we don't have the final numbers yet, but I think the last day of the program is today, so we're there close, we'll be there soon. We're estimating that approximately 40,000 low-income youth aged 14 to 24 were employed through summer programs throughout the state. And the majority of local areas prioritized youth in the foster care system or whose families received public assistance. Many areas also have worked with their, and continue to, with their juvenile probation departments to help youth offenders gain life skills and work experience. Over 75% of local areas have reported that they incorporated green work experience into their programs. Our organization actually is, much broader in its job training efforts and workforce training efforts in green, but so 75%, that's large.
That's good. Yep.
So youth had the opportunity to work in jobs related to energy efficiency, weatherization, retrofitting, and water conservation. They learned about environmental stewardship with many projects involving recycling, trail, stream, and forest restoration, and community gardening. Solar panel installation and technology were also at the forefront of green work experiences available to youth this summer. And these programs were pulled together so quickly. I mean, a lot of these folks who hadn't run the programs had to get RFPs on the street and get the programs up and running. Some areas also formed partnerships with their water districts, and a lot of them with utilities, and they're trying to prepare youth for tomorrow's jobs, some of them which don't exist yet. Panama can tell us what a green job is over a drink later. So in terms of demographics, who are our members serving? In the last 2 fiscal years, those enrolled in Workforce Investment Act funded programs were 11% of them were Asian, 18% African American, 29% white, and 42% Latino. About half were women. Now, we don't yet know, I don't think we yet have the numbers from the state in terms of what the breakdown is under the ARA funding. And part of that is because while most of the ARA funding has been obligated, in terms of the workforce training funding, right, it's not out the door. The folks haven't been served yet, so right, we don't know. 90% of workforce investment boards recently reported that they are working with community-based organizations. and 84% of those are in the process of or have already contracted out with community-based organizations ARA funding. They've committed ARA funding to CBOs who will serve special populations.
Okay.
And this is information we just received at the request of the California Workforce Investment Board, so we're pretty happy with those numbers. 87% of the workforce investment boards have said that they're designing ARA programs for target populations, including TANF recipients, veterans and their spouses, adjudicated youth, those who have limited English speaking skills, foster youth, people with disabilities. I could go on and on and on with at-risk populations. One of the questions asked was about how our members are serving the LGBT community. And in my ignorance, I thought, it's federal funding. I don't know that that's happening. So in talking with my members, they said, of course it's happening. We're forming partnerships. We're leveraging resources. So what they're doing is working with other organizations in their communities who do receive funding to serve this population. And then they're providing, this is one example, providing training to the Career Center staff to be more sensitive to the homelessness issues, the discrimination, substance abuse issues, so that then they can refer their clients to the career centers where they may normally not feel comfortable going. And then the people who are providing the services or the training, it might even be a class on interview etiquette, how to dress for a job, even those basic things, that the folks who are providing that training, they feel comfortable with them because they've gone through sensitivity training. So there's some really cool partnerships forming, and local communities are figuring it out. So I think that's great. In terms of training that's occurring, you've heard a lot of examples already, but our members are contracting with, one of the exemptions under the ARA funding is that they can contract directly with community colleges rather than having them be on what's called an eligible training provider list. They don't have to jump as many hoops, and they can really design curricula based on current needs. So our members are working with employers, utilities, colleges. They're developing curricula for clean and green occupations. They're buying blocks of training from the community colleges. They're working with adult education providers because we know about the draconian cuts to that population. And they're working, this is kind of cool. There's a certified apprenticeship program being developed with the IBEW, Workforce Investment Boards, and community colleges to train electricians to do solar residential work, because when we want to know about certification, who's certifying you, why, what does it mean? So I think this will mean something. Training people. One of the things that we were told is that some areas are trying to get their populations into short-term training. People are unemployed, they want to get back to work, and they're saying we just need short-term training so we can get back into work. But some areas are looking at that as an incentive to really kind of rope them in, I think, to longer-term training, so we can, have people really skilled up when the jobs hit again. It's what Susan was talking about earlier, to prepare people for those middle skill jobs and jobs with living wages. An example of another partnership that actually, it sounds like there's several partnerships like this throughout the state that I thought was really unique. Counties and cities are getting ARA funding to buy and rehabilitate foreclosed housing, and then houses. And then these houses will be used for low-income housing through HUD and will be sold to first-time home buyers. But what I think is the really cool part about it is that they're partnering so that when students complete classes, they can go and get paid work experience by doing weatherization and solar installation on those houses. So, and then ARA will pay the wages. So this is a partnership where HUD's involved, and the colleges and our clients, and it seems like a real win-win where you have, again, partners coming together. And this is something that ARA funds are paying for now, but all our members are looking to how we can sustain everything that's happening now. The ARA fundings are short-term. The funding will go away. So there's a big emphasis on sustainability and also not training people for jobs that don't exist.
Right.
So as Panama, our public servant, mentioned, there are multiple studies actually underway to ensure that the training that's available is will result in preparing people for jobs that actually exist. And, this is happening at a regional level with lots of folks involved. And so the planning is not happening in a vacuum. In terms of what's happening in the career centers, you won't be surprised because of the unemployment rate. Our folks have seen the number of enrollments into their programs, double, triple, and we're hearing about job fairs that aren't even typically, well, here's one example of a job fair where I think 4,500 people showed up and they had to have the police there, and it ended up being actually very calm, but so many people showed up, it was heartbreaking, and they had to close a section of a freeway. But there are like reverse job fairs almost they're having now. I haven't heard of this before, where they're bringing people in, and they're not bringing employers in, they're bringing job seekers in, and they're bringing training providers in, and they're saying, here are all the occupations in the area that we need to train for, to try to get people to think about what might, best suit them, and, talking to them about how to dress for an interview, all the kinds of things that normally we would see happen in a career center, that there's so many people, so they're, holding specific events for this, which is heartbreaking and also at the same time encouraging. A lot of our folks are co-enrolling TANF clients into the Workforce Investment Act, so that not as a way of double dipping, but as a way of ensuring that clients can continue to receive services, the supportive services that are necessary. I already touched on the planning that's happening. I didn't mention on the youth services. So there's a comprehensive assessment underway of adult programs for current summer youth to, so that when the summer youth program wraps up, youth are skilled up and ready for adult program options that may be available, so that there's not a disconnect there. And then in terms of regional collaboration, there's so much going on, not just in, within one workforce investment board and their partners, but there's a lot of kind of cross-fertilization going on with multiple workforce investment boards working together, coming in for funding. And really, I think the boards are doing a good job of brokering community resources, of leveraging funding. We're talking about reauthorization of the Workforce Investment Act, and I think, there's been some discussion about how many boards there are and, what it costs to administer oversight. But I think really what we're seeing is that they're taking on more of a brokering role and a partnering role, and actually bringing in more funding, especially with all these grants. In L.A., there's an L.A. Funding collaborative that has helped develop a partnership in Southern California. It's the Southern California Green Coalition. They have about 100 members. It's different than the statewide Green Stimulus Coalition. And they have a website, and they're really involved in ensuring that in that region of the state, they're all partnering together and ensuring that there are green opportunities. So that wraps up my comments. Oh, one other thing. Sorry, no, it doesn't. The mental health issues, somebody touched on this earlier, and I know that in Karen Fee's area, Karen is one of my board members and one of my bosses, and she'll probably speak more to this. They've figured out how to better provide, I think, mental health services, and they have a good partnership. But this is something that our members aren't necessarily used to dealing with such severe issues. We know if somebody's unemployed, it can make them depressed, and usually you get a job problem solved. But people are losing their homes now. There are people coming into career centers who are suicide risks. They might be dangerous. They're distraught, and that's actually separate than you have a mental health illness.
Right.
It's actually a temporary issue, and so we need sensitivity training for career center staff on how to deal with those issues and make sure that referrals are happening. So with that, unless you have questions, I'm done.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for giving us some numbers about the underserved population that we're really trying to address. And then we have the wrap-up here, Karen, and you are from a county, so you can give me a county perspective.
That's correct.
Okay.
So thank you, Madam Chair, for inviting me to speak today. So you heard about a lot of things from the state level perspective, and so I'm here to provide some local perspective. And I hold a unique perspective where we talked about, where Barbara Halsey and Jennifer and others talked about, where a lot of the workforce investment boards are housed in social service agencies. And I hold, like I said, the unique perspective because I'm the director for both the Workforce Investment Board and the CalWorks program in Sonoma County.
Okay.
So it allows me a lot of flexibility and outreach between populations so that I can do more with less. And right now I have more, but it's nice. So Sonoma County, just to give you a little perspective, there's some big numbers running around today. And Sonoma County is kind of a small to medium county. There's less than 500,000 people living in Sonoma County. We have great wine, great cheese, and other dairy products. But and we have a fairly low unemployment rate historically. Right now it's 10.2%, which is really great for most, compared to most of the state. And yet it's almost double what it was last year. And so, as Jennifer mentioned, people coming into the one-stop centers, the career centers, are desperate. There is no job creation really at this point. We are working. There are jobs being filled every day, yet there are more people being laid off than jobs created, and it's becoming very desperate, and families are being severely impacted, and it has changed the culture of the work that we do. So, but I do want to share with you what we're doing in Sonoma County with the ARA funding. First of all, the summer youth program has been highlighted quite a bit, and we had a great summer youth program in Sonoma County. We were one, because we were fairly small, that didn't have an ongoing summer youth program. We received $1.2 million in Sonoma County, and we were able to place over 300 youth. And that's not a lot compared to a lot of counties, but it was a lot for us. It's double the number of our year-round youth program. And in 4 short months, we were able to get a program up and running. One of the reasons why we were so successful is because of our partnerships, and because we're a smaller county, we have a lot of great partnerships. And also because I administer both the WIA program and CalWorks, what I did was I trained my CalWorks eligibility workers on WIA, took this huge task, this team of people, and did eligibility in a group huge setting. So we were able to get youth eligibility determined very quickly and get them into jobs, because that was the main criteria, as we wanted to get them into work very quickly. We also, one of our partnerships I want to highlight is the Sonoma County Water Agency and some nonprofits. The Water Agency provided us with over $200,000 of cash match to our program, which helped provide coordinators, teachers actually do some environmental stewardship education and pay for transportation to and from sites. So the 80% of our youth were in crews that worked on stream restoration and creek maintenance, and they were able to complete over 10 miles of creek restoration in 6 weeks. Our school system starts early, so a lot of the kids that were school age had to go back to school, unfortunately. But it was great. They had a great taste of what this work was all about, and the reason why water is important and what is in the water, and they were looking under microscopes, and it was just great. Likewise, local businesses discounted work boots, tools, and other materials, and in true what we think of the intent as ARA funds, all materials where possible were purchased at local vendors, which supported the local economy. So we just have a great local economy. Some of the demographics of Sonoma County summer youth included, we had 30% of the youth had families received CalWorks. Because we were able to do great outreach to CalWorks since it's our program. 21% were or had been in the foster care system. 18% had been on probation. 36% were female and 64% were male. And 43% were disabled youth. So we had a good range of demographics. We also polled the youth on how they spent their paychecks, because we were really interested. This sometimes was their very first work opportunity, and their responses were pretty reasonable but interesting at the same time. 26% said they were saving for school or spending it on school expenses, sometimes because their family could not. 20% had car expenses, gas and other things. 19% said they had to buy their own clothing. 16% had to pay their own rent or utility bills. Only 13% said they spent it on recreation, movies, iPods, fun things like that. But what was really interesting is 6% said that they were paying court fines with this money, which was really important that these kids learn to pay their court fines. And the probation department, we were really connected with our probation department, and they were thrilled, and that kids were paying the restitutions, and it was good. Now our workforce it's real. So our workforce investment board, the Sonoma County Workforce Investment Board, is targeting several things with this ARA funds. They've established a committee to focus on English language learners in Sonoma County, most of which are Spanish-speaking in our community, because we noticed that there's a huge achievement gap and graduation rate gap for Latino families. So we're increasing our partnerships with education, chambers of commerce, businesses, et cetera, to provide outreach and develop goals. And we also want to make sure with our limited funding, we don't duplicate services. Right. So we're all pulling together to figure out what we're doing in our community and how we can help each other and not duplicate. They've also established a committee to focus on energy and green jobs. And our WIB, in collaboration with 3 neighboring counties, submitted a grant application to the SFP for California Clean Energy Workforce Training Program, and I'm hoping somebody can give me a little heads up before tomorrow on our goal there. But we want to train laid-off construction workers, CalWorks participants, and other low-income individuals. The Committee on Green Jobs has defined green jobs as those that provide products or services that do or support the following. They conserve natural or energy resources, they provide clean alternatives, and they reduce pollution. So those are some goals of the Workforce Investment Board. They're also working with different agencies. Our county government, for example, working with Nissan, is purchasing an all-electric fleet vehicle. And so we're working with our community college to change their alternative fuel program into an all-electric maintenance program. So it's giving us some new skill areas that hopefully jobs will be increasing in. Installation of EV power chargers for the electric vehicles, et cetera. So it's pretty exciting. The WIB is also recognizing that low-income families spend a disproportionate amount of their income on utilities. And to respond to this, the WIB is working with several nonprofits in the community, and we've just opened a green center in Sonoma County where low-income individuals, it's kind of the one-stop energy source, especially for low-income families, where they can go and inquire about weatherization or other things that they can use. Many times they live in rentals, and so they can't make the direct changes to their homes that they maybe could if they had the money and if they own the home. But here at the Green Center, they can get some information and get some services to help improve their utilities, and they can also get direct training on green jobs. Our Youth Build program is housed there now, and they're starting a solar program, and we're going to expand more and more. The center just opened this month. The WIB is also collaborating with the Sonoma County Energy Independence Program, which is what I believe is California's first AB 811 program to assist property owners to retrofit their homes and businesses to become more energy efficient. So it was interesting when I was having my first conversations with the Energy Independence Program. I said, why aren't you using home energy auditors, HERS raters, in your buildings as part of a requirement? And they said, because there are no people who are trained and are certified in Sonoma County. And I said, well, how? It's the chicken and the egg. We can't train people to do jobs that don't exist. And if you had that as part of your program, then we could train people, and they would fill jobs that are much needed out there. So we're working on that, and that is part of our grant application for the Clean Energy Workforce Training Program. But we're also noticing that they don't have a clear guideline on the direction that their AB 811 program is going. We want to make sure that there's enough trained workforce out there to respond to their needs, and yet they don't know what the needs are. So we're hoping also to build a database where we can track what kind of requests are coming in for energy audits or energy efficiency retrofits, so that we can make sure that people are trained in the right direction, as we've said over and over. We don't want to train people for jobs that don't exist. Right. Let's see. And we're also working with the Climate Protection Campaign, who has the goal of retrofitting 80% of Sonoma County buildings by 2015 to work with them in the same fashion. But mostly one of the biggest things we're doing is targeting ARA funds to provide training dollars for CalWorks participants because of cutbacks in CalWorks welfare to work programs. And we're hosting training fairs, as Jennifer was describing. And as Ruben mentioned, there are some felons, for example, that are not eligible to receive TANF services that want to better their lives. And because we're an integrated system, we're able to serve them with workforce investment dollars, including the ARA funds. So that's a really nice thing we're doing in Sonoma County. We are also designing a subsidized employment program with TANF ECF dollars that Charlie talked about to put an additional 400 Sonoma County residents to work in the next year. We released an RFP to contract services so we can put people quickly to work. In addition to CalWorks families, we're targeting low-income individuals on Workforce Investment Act services, child welfare, and general assistance families, those who have even non-custodial children that they want to reunite with. And the summer job program, because we're integrated, has provided us with the experience now to run a subsidized employment program. So
Great.
whereas other counties may not have that, we have that luckily.
Right.
So in Sonoma County, the WIB and social service departments are integrated, as I've mentioned, allowing a lot of flexibility to serve unemployed and underemployed individuals in our local area. Because of this, many underrepresented population, including women on CalWorks, people with disabilities, English language learners, and others, have the ability to access services within both of our programs for CalWorks and WIA. And a lot of times, the funding source is invisible to our population who are seeking services, which is always our goal. And the ARA funds have allowed us to expand our services and create new programs like the subsidized employment pieces to put people to work and support our local economy. Without the ARA funds, there's not enough job creation going on to put people to work. And as I mentioned at the beginning, people are desperate for work. So the thing that the ARA funds give us most benefit is it gives us the ability to keep people to work in subsidized employment. And it's really important that even if it's a temporary short-term job, that they get that opportunity because they learn new experiences, they create new networks, and they get to test out positions that they don't know if they're interested or not, or if it's something different. And there's nothing bad at all about subsidized temporary jobs. It's wonderful. So thank you again for letting me speak today. I appreciate it, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Any comment, Mr. Lizardo?
No, just that, thank you for all the great work.
It's all very interesting what's going on. It's really appreciative of everybody who spent the time to come before us and give us some insight. And for us I think we will spend the next year not writing more bills, maybe a few, but doing more oversight about what's going on and making sure that the ARA funds are being spent the way that we would like to see them spent here in California and coincide with whether the federal government is going and with the green energy and efficiencies in transportation and allied health areas that will better serve all of us. So with that, I think I have two. I want to thank you very much for spending the time with us. And I think I have two folks who would like to come make a public comment. And then I have some closing comments, and then we can call this adjourned. So thank you very much. Do we have the names of the... Okay. With the two folks who would like to make... Okay. Please come up and identify yourself. Oh, you're the only one left. Oh. Please come. Okay. Identify yourself and your organization if you have one. And hi.
My name is Linda Evans, and I work with Legal Services for Prisoners with Children and All of Us or None. All of Us or None is a project of Legal Services, and it is an organization of formerly incarcerated people struggling to win full restoration of our rights after we leave prison. I didn't know I would get an opportunity to actually address the panel, but there are some major concerns that we have. And I think I would probably separate them for brevity's sake into three areas. Number one, the fact that there is a lot of workforce development and training becoming available under the ARRA is very, very important, of course. However, many, many, many people, in fact, over 20% of the population of California has a conviction history that will be used to eliminate them from consideration for those jobs. That is actually undermining the efforts of job training professionals and employment development professionals to serve this population because of the discrimination that they face that is structural discrimination. One of the solutions that we believe should be adopted for that problem is to actually incorporate contract language in contracts under the ARRA and, of course, other state contracts that would read something like this. All companies contracting to provide these services must comply with federal and state equal opportunity and employment laws and principles. Any company with a discriminatory hiring practice, such as a blanket ban against hiring people with conviction histories, will not be eligible for this contract. Obviously, this relates to what Mr. Luzardo said earlier about compliance and the guidelines under the ARRA for complying with federal and state employment laws. And we feel that it's really crucial because many, many companies that may receive money under the ARRA actually have blanket bans in place in addition to other types of employment discrimination. I would say that the second area of major concern for us is the exclusion of people with drug convictions from the eligibility processes for TANF and CalWORKS. This means because the vast majority of social service money is coming through TANF eligibility, it means that thousands, literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are being permanently excluded from any way out of poverty and any way to receive these benefits. So because, of course, the number of people with drug convictions increases every single year, it means that the numbers are escalating, and there is, unfortunately, no real data that has been collected on the total numbers of people since 1996 who are being excluded from TANF eligibility in California. This is an urgent situation. And I'm afraid that what is happening in the current public discourse about the ARRA and the stimulus funds is that the exclusion of really poor people, really marginalized communities is being normalized. There's a lot of emphasis on newly unemployed people, on people who are losing their houses, who perhaps need rental assistance, and those people have already been in the mainstream of our society. Many, many thousands of people are permanently excluded, and they are not being discussed in the process of distributing and eligibility for ARRA funds. And I would just like to say one other thing in addition to the question of drug convictions and how those are actually being used to exclude people from any kind of eligibility for assistance, is that it isn't just the 40,000 prisoners who may or may not be released under the federal court order. As we know, the state is currently in contempt of that court order, and no one has been released. There are 10,000 to 12,000 people released from prison every single month in California. Many of them return because there are no services, there is no employment, there is tremendous discrimination. And without the drug rehabilitation and treatment services that are needed to combat drug addiction and the convictions that flow from that, which are a public health problem in our state, there will be no ability for people to overcome that disease and actually, avoid convictions and therefore become eligible even for TANF benefits. So I really urge you to look not only at the immediate implementation of ARRA funds and how it's being spent. I really appreciate the fact that you held this hearing to focus on marginalized communities, but there are some fundamental problems in terms of discrimination and in terms of the eligibility requirements that really are excluding thousands of people, and we need your help.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name's Mason Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Transgender Law Center. I really appreciate you holding this hearing. We have been concerned that The industry-specific nature of our funds means that it's not getting to a lot of women, a lot of people of color, and a lot of other marginalized communities. We've specifically been doing workforce development within the transgender community and as well as the greater gay and lesbian and bisexual community of California, and are finding that the recession has been used as an excuse for increased employment discrimination. We're getting a number of calls from people who are losing their jobs under the auspices of layoffs at a very disproportionate rate, and the sense of that bias is being kind of under the guise of the economic downturn. At the same time, as we've been in conversations with EDD and a lot of the workforce investment boards, it's become really clear that it's hard to do any kind of targeted marketing to the one-stops or to leverage some of the ARA funds to talk about how to make the new employment programs and existing employment programs more open and accessible to LGBT communities. We did a survey last year and found out that transgender Californians are twice as likely to be under the poverty line, twice as likely to be unemployed, and twice as likely to have a college diploma. So many of them actually have the kind of skills that are needed for the jobs that are available, and yet barriers to the existing workforce development programs, oftentimes that are unintentional. People who aren't prepared to address some of the specific barriers that face LGBT workers mean that a lot of people are not able to access those programs. We've been doing trainings at the one-stops at different parts of the state, and some of them that actually were referenced earlier, but we do those on our own dime because they're just the right thing to do. There's not actually funding that's going to providing those trainings, so if we're able to connect with individual WIBs, we can do that one by one.
You have some web people here tonight.
Yeah, so hopefully we can figure out a way to do that more systematically, but we oftentimes do those in response to a call from a community member who's had a problem, who's not been able to use those services. So I'd love to get any kind of support to figure out how can we make sure that the services and the funding under ARA really does impact all Californians who need help with the economic downturn, and to make sure that the industry focus doesn't lose focus of the fact that we have a lot of folks who are disenfranchised and need those services.
Appreciate that. All right, I appreciate that. Anyone else have a public comment? Oh, yes. Danita? Good evening.
Thank you. I'll be quick. Danita Stromgren with the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network. It was very interesting, and I appreciate Senator Liu and the sponsoring organizations for having this hearing today. I would just like to build a little bit on some of the information shared, just to say that in order for many of the low-income working women that were talked about today, most of whom probably are moms, that child care is a critical piece in order to have them retain and obtain work. Around $220 million of AIRA funding over the 2-year period has been allocated for child development services. $91 million each for the 2 years is going for direct child care services. Those funds obviously provide both the funding for the families who need child care, allowing them to work, but also then provide the funding for providers to retain their jobs and stay in the child care field. Another roughly $18 million of funding has been provided for quality enhancements for child care. And those services not only represent the improvement of services to help children be better prepared for school, but it also, some of those funds also go to train providers to improve their services and make them more marketable in the workplace. So as you look towards the use of the federal funds that support low-income women and minorities and stimulate the economy, we just would like you to remember the critical role that child care plays in all of that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to thank everyone who participated today and the audience and all the staff folks that helped put this together. Everybody, you know, we've been working as silos, and, you know, it just was heartwarming to understand that there is more coordination and cooperation among many of you. And I would just the state has an interest in seeing that we are effective and that we do deliver out our funds to the populations that are really in need. And I would encourage your continued efforts in this behalf, and I invite you to please continue to cooperate with me in terms of giving me your feedback. I want to thank the Women's Caucus who's still here, and the Latino Caucus and the Western Center on Law and Poverty for helping put this together, and I want to thank all of you who have participated. So we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. And we just need to be more vigilant. And I know this year is going to be one of those years that, since there is other people's new money, not the state's new money, we're going to be vigilant to see whether or not those monies really get out and serve the people that they're directed towards. So thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you especially, Mr. Lozardo, for good. Great. Thanks. He ran.